In the Middle Kingdom, Egypt entered a completely different era. Not only was it dominated by the power of kings and wars, but also by the flourishing of literature, art, and daily life. Scholars call this period the classical age of Egyptian literature. One of the most famous stories to appear at this time is the story of Senusret. A man was working in the royal court and suddenly fled to live among tribes outside Egypt. The story tells of his fear, his alienation, and his longing to return to his homeland. What makes it special is that you feel very deep human emotions, as if you were reading a novel written 100 years ago, not 4,000. Art also changed. Before, it was all about kings and gods, but in the Middle Kingdom, the people themselves came into the picture. Engravings began to depict the farmer planting, the soldier training, and the merchant measuring his merchandise. For the first time, we see the lives of ordinary Egyptians alongside the kings. Daily life also became clearer. The farmer grew wheat and barley to feed all of Egypt. The soldier wasn't just for war, he also participated in major projects like digging canals and ditches. The merchant's role expanded, connecting Egypt to the world around it. It was as if identity became clearer. Egyptians were no longer merely subordinate to the king. They now had their own voice. I am a farmer. I am a soldier. I am a merchant. Therefore, we can say that the Middle Kingdom was not only an era of power, but also an era of the Egyptian person himself, whose voice was expressed in literature and art, and whose daily life was immortalized on the walls of temples and tombs. And outside of Egypt, in Mesopotamia, Babylon began to rise powerfully, later to become famous for the Code of Hammurabi. In the Levant, small cities like Tyre and Sidon were just beginning their journey in maritime trade. In Greece, there was no major civilization yet, just small, scattered communities scattered across the islands. And in China, the legendary historical Shah dynasty was in its infancy. While the Egyptians were writing stories like Senusret and immortalizing their feelings, the world around them was still building the foundations of its civilizations, which would grow centuries later.
While Egypt was experiencing its second golden age, the era of literature, art, and stability in the Middle Kingdom, the world around it did not stand still. Every civilization had a story, and every nation was writing a new chapter in history. Mesopotamia. In the east, on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, the city of Ur was luminous. The third dynasty of Ur reached the pinnacle of glory, laws, organization, and livestock trade. But just as happened with Egypt before it, glory did not last long. The Amorites attacked, and Ur fell. And from the midst of chaos, Babylon arose. And with Hammurabi, the most famous laws in history were written, laws that attempted to establish justice, but also revealed the harshness of life at the time. India, Indus Valley Civilization. A little further east, the Indus Valley Civilization still exists. Its great cities, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were well planned, with straight streets and sewage systems. But the signs began to appear. Rivers changed their course, trade waned, and once prosperous cities began to collapse. It was the beginning of the end for one of the most brilliant ancient civilizations, Europe, the Mediterranean. In Europe, the Bronze Age was still in its final stages. Greece was still at the beginning of its journey, but the spark had been lit. In Crete, the Minoans built massive palaces like Knossos, palaces filled with colorful murals depicting a life of dance, celebration, and mythology. This civilization would later influence the Greeks and all of Europe, China. And in the Far East, China was entering a new phase. After the Xia dynasty, the Shang dynasty emerged. They were the first people to write known Chinese script, engraved on bones and bronze. This writing became the foundation of a civilization that would last for thousands of years. With writing, a stronger state emerged, armies, kings, and beliefs connected to the heavens and spirits. Conclusion. So, while we in Egypt were writing stories like Senusret's and depicting the lives of farmers, merchants, and soldiers, the world around them was taking shape. Laws were being written in Babylon, civilizations were falling in India, palaces were being built in Crete, and letters were being written in China. All of this was happening at the very moment Egypt was experiencing one of its greatest moments in history. But I wonder, will this glory continue, or is history hiding a new chapter full of events that will change the fate of Egypt and the entire world. Muluk.
From the heart of chaos and hunger, and from the midst of blood and conflict, Egypt was able to rise again. The pharaohs proved that no matter how much they fell, they could rise again. In the Middle Kingdom, the Egyptians weren't content with simply settling down. No, they created a civilization of the finest arts and literature. And they told us stories like the story of Senusret, which reveals how much the ordinary person had a voice and a presence in history. But every era has an end. And although the Middle Kingdom was a symbol of strength and order, it eventually collapsed. The Nile failed them again, disputes grew, and the country opened up to a danger it had never seen before. For the first time, their problem wasn't from within, it was from without. From the east, coming foreign invaders, the Hyksos. The invaders who weren't content with entering Egypt, they wanted to rule it. The Egyptians had to face this challenge, a challenge that would change the face of Egypt forever. And from here, the new story begins. How did Egypt transition from division and weakness to an empire stretching from the Levant to Nubia? In the next episode, the Hyksos era and the New Kingdom. How did the Egyptians transform their ordeal into a great empire?